Hi, Lou Pulsifer here to try to construct an analogy between Dungeons & Dragons character classes and American football. Now, I'm doing this just for fun, although it's also, I think, useful if players think this way because it will encourage them to cooperate. So I want to match the character class functions to the functions in American football because both depend on combined arms cooperation to succeed. Now that's not true generally of 3rd edition D&D and even 4th edition D&D, but it was very much true of 1st and 2nd, and I suspect of 5th. Now there's a serious side to this. Before World War II, the Germans felt that the US Army would behave like an American football team. Now at that time, American football was all about running the ball 4 yards in a cloud of dust, or even 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So it was very much smash mouth, in your face, where the bigger, stronger teams tended to overwhelm their opponents. No, it's not like that anymore, but that's the way it was before World War II, and it turned out that that was a pretty good evaluation of how the U.S. Army did things. The U.S. Army had the best of everything, as General Patton said in his speech in the movie, and the most, and tried to blast through the opposition. So I'm going to make the same kind of comparison in terms of Dungeons & Dragons character classes. Now, especially if you're not familiar with American football, I want to say a little bit about generally how it works. It's much more cerebral, much more varied than it was in the 1930s, and passing tends to dominate rather than running the ball. It is highly cooperative. If one person fails to do his job, the entire play often fails, or if it's on the defense, then somebody may get a big gain or even a touchdown. The offense tries to score, the defense tries to prevent that. The special teams are often involved when there's kicks to be done, extra points, field goals, punts. And in American football, professional football nowadays, the offensive players very rarely play defense. The defensive players very rarely play offense. And the special teams are often second-string guys or people who have been hired just to play special teams because they're good at it. So in American football, the quarterback is the key man and the leader on offense. The offensive line tries to prevent the defensive players from interfering with or sacking the quarterback before he throws the ball. The running backs block for the quarterback, but also rush, carry the ball, with everyone else blocking for him. The winning team often rushes the ball better, but the passing is responsible for far more yardage. On defense, the middle linebacker takes the same role as the quarterback on offense. And linebackers reinforce the defensive line. They try to stop runners, try to sack the quarterback, but they also defend against passing. The defensive secondary tries to hold the quarterback in check by defending the receivers that are trying to catch the ball. So, in terms of modern professional football, the quarterbacks are the wizards, or the wizards are the quarterbacks, whichever way you want to look at it. And by wizards I mean those who cast arcane spells. They do the most damage. They do poorly when the blockers don't keep the enemy off of them. Now that's not true in 3rd and 4th edition, and perhaps even in 5th edition, but in 1st and 2nd edition, if somebody got to the wizard and meleeed him, the wizard was in big, big trouble because in general he couldn't cast spells anymore. The wizards require the help of receivers, who, as you'll see, are rogues, rangers, and monks. The quarterbacks benefit greatly from a good running game. The specialist fighters and the clerics, they can't do it alone, but with a proper crew, the quarterbacks do the largest fraction of the damage to the enemy. And of course, the fighter types are the linemen. The linemen on both sides have to do well for their team to do well. They're the big guys, the warriors, quote unquote. Line play is, quote, in the trenches, unquote. Very much like fantasy role-playing games. Running backs we could see as specialist fighters like paladins especially, or 1st edition rangers, and Clerics. Running backs both run the ball, gain yardage, which we convert to doing damage, and they also catch passes. Clerics can be offensive if you're not playing cleric equals healer, but clerics can also be defensive. In this case, the blocking part that the running backs do, both blocking for the quarterback and blocking for other running backs. The linebackers also are clerics. They're a more defensive role. They're trying to prevent gains in yardage, but they can still hit hard at times. Clerics or linebackers can also defend against enemy spellcasters, the quarterback. Linebackers defending against the pass. And of course, clerics have specialist spells to help protect people and defend. The defensive secondary is rogues. Defensive backs can be everywhere and do everything, from defending long passes to blitzing the quarterback. They're fast, but they're also the smallest players in the game. They're not primarily offensive, though they can occasionally intercept for a touchdown. And that sounds like rogues to me. The wide receivers would be rogues also, and monks. Wide receivers can provide a quick strike in football, kind of like the surprise and the stealthy backstab. Rogues are often scouts. And there's not really a scout in American football, but there's certainly people who go long, go far afield. They get far from where the play starts. Monks in particular are kind of commandos. Their job is to keep the enemy spellcasters busy so the rest of the party can win the fight. And in American football, that would be somebody like a safety who's an outstanding blitzer who goes in and takes down the quarterback instead of staying back to defend the pass sometimes. Special teams, the punt teams would be rogues and post-first edition rangers. The kickoff teams, rogues, rangers, fighters, clerics. Field goal teams, fighters and barbarians. Field goal team is more or less a pure expression of line play. So, the reason this analogy works is because of the cooperation that's required in 1st and 2nd edition D&D and in American football. 3rd edition D&D is more a one-man army game. It's more like pro basketball, where one person can really stand out. 4th edition brought cooperation back, but not so much as in 1st and 2nd edition, because the individuals are so much more survivable on their own. There's nobody like the wizards and even the clerics to some extent in the 1st edition, where if the enemy gets to them and melees them and they can't cast spells anymore, they're in big trouble. Also consider there are 11 players on a side in football, and there are 5 players on a side in basketball, and the number of characters in a party is pretty important as to how the party plays. If you've got a game with only 4 characters in the party, like 3rd edition D&D recommended, then it's going to be a lot different than if you have 8 characters in the party, which was the way I always played 1st edition D&D. If necessary, we'd play 2 characters per player, or the people who were refed regularly would get to play 2 characters, and the people who didn't would play 1. In a party of 4 players, it's more likely that one character is going to dominate the game than when there's a party of 8. So, think in terms of cooperation. That's what American football is all about now, and to my mind, that's what 1st edition D&D was about.